There exists a quiet category of human experience that is often misunderstood and rarely defended. It belongs to those whose emotional responses arrive quickly and visibly, not because life overwhelms them, but because life reaches them fully. In ordinary moments, these individuals register subtle shifts that others pass by. A change in tone alters the emotional temperature of a room. A fragment of memory surfaces with unexpected weight. A simple scene carries layers of meaning beyond its surface. When tears appear, they do not announce themselves as spectacle. They emerge quietly, often without permission, reflecting an internal response that has already completed its work before language can intervene. For much of modern life, this response has been labeled incorrectly. Sensitivity has been framed as excess. Emotional expression has been mistaken for instability. And those who experience deeply have been encouraged, implicitly and explicitly, to restrain themselves. This misunderstanding forms the beginning of a long internal conflict. From an early age, people who cry easily learn to observe themselves through an external lens. They become aware of how quickly emotion rises, how visibly it expresses itself, and how out of sync it appears with the pace of others. They learn composure not as preference, but as necessity. They regulate expression, suppress reaction, and rehearse explanations for responses that feel natural but appear excessive. What complicates this experience is that the emotion rarely ends with the moment. Thoughts continue to unfold. Details replay. Meaning accumulates long after others have moved on. This extended internal processing leads to a quiet conclusion that something within them requires correction. Yet this conclusion is built on a false premise that all minds are designed to process reality in the same way. Human cognition operates on varying levels of filtration. Some brains prioritize efficiency, rapidly discarding information deemed unnecessary. Others remain open longer, allowing more sensory, emotional, and contextual data to enter awareness. Psychology refers to this openness as low latent inhibition, a reduced mental filter that allows perception to remain wide before categorization occurs. In such minds, background details are not dismissed. They are registered. Tone, expression, atmosphere, and emotional nuance all enter conscious awareness. This openness often coincides with a highly active mirror neuron system. Emotional states observed in others are not simply recognized. They are internally mirrored. The boundary between internal experience and external emotion becomes thin. Depth of processing further intensifies this effect. These minds do not skim experience. They engage with it fully, examining implications, patterns, and emotional significance. Within this structure, tears are not signs of fragility. They are physiological responses to sustained emotional intensity. They occur not because the system is weak, but because it is responsive. Sensitivity is not an evolutionary error. Traits that persist across generations do so because they serve a function. Throughout human history, societies required individuals who could perceive danger before it manifested, sense tension before conflict erupted, and interpret emotional states that remained unspoken. These individuals were not positioned for dominance or confrontation. They occupied roles of interpretation, guidance, and restraint. They were the observers of the emotional field, the translators of human experience, the ones who understood what others felt but could not articulate. When viewed through this lens, emotional sensitivity becomes a form of intelligence, one oriented toward awareness rather than control. This reframing alters the internal narrative. What was once perceived as imbalance begins to reveal itself as specialization. In contemporary environments, this specialization often appears as withdrawal. Sensitive individuals limit exposure not out of avoidance, but out of self-regulation. They retreat from emotional saturation to preserve clarity. They approach expression carefully, aware of its permanence and impact. This restraint is sometimes misinterpreted as detachment or insecurity. In reality, it reflects discernment. Psychological research describes this phenomenon as vantage sensitivity, the distinction between resilience types. Dandelions thrive in nearly any condition. They endure disruption without significant impact. Orchids require specificity. Their growth depends on environment, timing, and care. Both forms are valid. Neither is superior. The error arises when one is forced to imitate the other. Attempting to harden sensitivity does not produce strength. It produces exhaustion. When sensitive minds are allowed appropriate conditions, quiet, boundaries, selectivity, their natural capacities stabilize rather than fracture. Some minds were never designed to blunt experience. They were designed to register it fully. Tears, in this context, are not evidence of weakness. They are signals of depth, a response from a system that perceives life in greater resolution. When sensitivity is no longer treated as a flaw to be corrected, it settles into its rightful place, as a quiet, perceptive intelligence that understands what moves beneath the surface of human life.